All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining this meetup today. It's a very interesting topic that we're going to be talking about. It's eating like our ancestors, a guide to true wellness. And tonight we have a special guest. Her name is Dr. Lale, and she holds a bachelor's degree in genetics and biochemistry, a PhD in molecular and cellular biology from Dartmouth Medical School, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship on biomarkers for cystic fibrosis. She directed a clinic research lab on I can't even say the word. You know what I mean.
Immunotherapy.
There you go. Thank you. I don't know why I'm having a tongue twister there. For blood cancers and served as a research project manager at the Dartmouth Institute for Health Policy. And, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lale to take it from here. Thanks, Dr. Lale.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. And let's see. All right. Can you see my screen? And I'm going to go to slide mode. But
Yep.
I'm going to ask you to let me know if I advance and we'll go down to the next slide. Yes? Okay, great. Well, first of all, I'm going to move this out of my way so I don't need to see myself. First of all, thank you for being here, all of you. I am really, really honored to be here. And Dan, thank you for inviting me to be a speaker tonight. I absolutely love speaking to people who want to learn more about health and wellness, and I love teaching. So the title of today's talk, or tonight's talk, depending on where you are, is Reclaim Your Health with Food. And as Dan introduced, did a nice introduction, I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about me. I decided that I wanted to be a scientist when I was 13. I won't get into too much of that, but I knew that I was going to do that. And I was also told that, well, it's in a male dominated world, especially where I was from. I was born in Iran. That was kind of impossible. And it's been sort of my motto to say, if you want me to do something, tell me I can't. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at that, on my 15th birthday, my life's mission was defined. And that's because my dad, who was basically God and heaven and earth and everything in between, and was the only real parent in my life, was diagnosed with cancer, and he died on my 15th birthday. He was 49. And that is the day I became obsessed with cancer. Fast forward, going through the war in Iran, Iraq, and political upheavals, I actually fled the country as a political refugee. I ended up in Belgium and decided to study there to go to college. And because there's three languages and really, really hard to get into university, I ended up in the United States, fortunately. Three continents, three countries, and 20 years and a few days after the day my dad died, I finally became a research scientist. I got my bachelor's degree in genetics and food biochemistry in the University of California, Davis, and a PhD in molecular biology of cancer at Dartmouth Medical School. As Dan already said that, I'm not going to read the rest of these for you, but after many years of working as a scientist and in research, I still was missing something. And that was basically the fact that I could not erase the image of my dad, barely 100 pounds, dying on his deathbed, deteriorating, literally succumbing to effects of chemotherapy and radiation. I wanted to have a vision of my dad when he was healthy and happy, and no one should see that. So I knew that something was missing, and this wasn't the only way. And I wasn't about to live my life getting into drug therapy and drug discovery, which I did for some time as I was a postdoc, but I was not happy with that life. So I decided to use my brain sort of problem solving skills and my skills that I had been fortunate enough to learn in college and graduate school, to put it all to work and really focus on prevention and lifestyle changes before disease happens, rather than the sick care uh, um, strategy that really our sick care system has. Depending on where you are, obviously we have someone from Argentina, but here in the United States, and from what I learned in Europe as well, it's generally a sick care system and philosophy where we wait till people get sick and then we decide to fix it and put a Band-Aid on it. So I shifted focus. I did that part-time while I was still working full-time as a clinical research scientist, and I worked weekends and nights on my sort of business. And eventually in 2018, I sort of broke free from academic research and never looked back and never been happier. Shortly after that, I became a certified health coach for patient care. And today, I give the title to myself because there's no title for what I do. So I'm a nutritional healing doctor. I help people with cancer and chronic conditions and obesity to heal their bodies using customized, fully personalized food prescriptions that is unique to each individual. So that is a little bit about me. And today I'm going to talk to you about human evolution. We're going to take a walk back in time together, and the nutritionism that came about and the timeline of dietary shifts and all the diets and major things that we have seen over the time, and what is true health and the definition of health. We talk about the 3-4-50 initiative and what we have learned from the past and what we can learn from the past, and how we can use the lessons from our ancestors to reclaim our health again. So a walk back in time, I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit, really touch the surface of human evolutionary biology. And this is the Homo habilis here, which is circled. And that is really the first true humans, which was many million, almost 2.5 million years ago initiated. And the Homo habilis literally means true humans. And they were known as handyman, and that the term means handyman for their basic, this is the first time they started using simple tools. However, they were still mostly scavengers. So they really went around and whatever other animals and hunters got, they basically would pick up the leftovers. So their diets was primarily based on vegetables and plants, and a small proportion of their diet was from meat and protein from meat because of likely because they weren't really hunting yet and they had to basically deal with whatever they could find. So a little bit later, Homo erectus, about 1.9 million years ago, that initiated, and this is the first hominid to exhibit modern human body-like proportions. They are really a lot more upright, a little bit larger. And this is when they started developing tools and using actually fire to cook food. So the proportion of food really changed drastically because now these guys could hunt. And so their diet was almost 50-50 split of large animal-based protein and then, of course, vegetation. And because they started cooking and using tools, it actually really improved their diet and nutrition and absorption, among other things. So this is the first time that it's shown the evidence of using advanced tools and fire, and the dietary proportion kind of shifted quite a bit. So Neanderthals, about 400,000 years ago, and they started adapting to colder climates. At the time, obviously, there weren't much sheltering and things like that, but they started kind of building things and actually adapting to the different types of climates. And this is where really they started relying heavily on large game protein and consumed obviously nuts. And when they discovered that, prior to this, really most of the fat came from animal-based fat and cooked foods, obviously. There is some evidence of sophisticated hunting because there are some evidence of tools that they built and that they used at that time. And you can see the body frame and structure slowly start to change. Then we come to Homo sapiens, which appeared around 300,000 years ago, and they were the first appearance of anatomically modern humans, looking more like us. And they are highly adaptable to diets that were mostly due to environmental changes. And they really started traveling, and they were hunting more for diverse diets. If you can imagine, if we didn't have any tools at the beginning to begin with, or very few tools, it was much easier for a human to hunt a large animal that doesn't move as fast, right? So that's kind of how we started. And then eventually, with development of tools and kind of other technology at the time, if you will, we started going for other types of animals, namely smaller animals, birds, and then later on fish. So really, our diet started with large animal, wild game, and then we moved on to some smaller animals, birds, and then at the end came fish, which surprises a lot of people. And around 10,000 years ago, that's when the evidence of kind of similar to modern agriculture started. And then they started having a lot more diversity in terms of food options and vegetation and all of that, with the innovations that came along. So the interglacial period, which is about 12,000 years ago, this is kind of, if you haven't studied evolution or anthropology, kind of, you may not necessarily have heard of this. Many of you may have. Forgive me if I'm explaining or simplifying it. But if you have heard of something called the genetic drift, and this is where the warmer period started, and then parts of the planet started breaking apart or fusing together. So there were different sort of climates that separated from each other. And that caused something called the genetic drift. So based on a place where some of the humans ended up, different parts of what now is called continents that were separated by bodies of water or ice, people started having basically certain genotypes and phenotypes at the time, because they were isolated to those particular isolated environments or parts of the world. So there was diverse ecosystem to support a lot of different varied types of diet. So the parts of this genetic drift, for example, made people to evolve into, based on where they ended up, to be more thriving on, say, seafood and fish, while there was not much wild game or large animals were present, and vice versa. And there were, of course, forests and grassland, started expanding, and human population started growing. And of course, with the more and more tools and technology, we started adapting to different types of environment, and agricultural practices started to grow and develop further. Now, the Neolithic period, it began around 10,000 BC. And that is when really the big shift happened from hunter-gatherer to agricultural societies. Humans started domesticating animals, of course, domesticating plants, and more and more farming tools and farming techniques started developing. Because population was growing, obviously humans started finding solutions to address the population of growth, which was not a very great thing. And that is sort of when all of the changes to our diet happened that was not beneficial. I always say that it's industrial revolution, but it started a little bit before that, when in order to be able to supply enough food, humans started growing grains and using dairy products. You can think about, if food is going to be scarce, you are going to milk the cow and not eat the cow. So we became cheap and we became lazy. And that is when the change of our diet and lifestyle from hunter-gatherer to this agricultural way of living really started becoming detrimental to human health. And this might sound as a surprise or shocking to a lot of you, but really this is where most of the evidence for initiation or getting worse of chronic conditions started happening. So our health started going down the hill from that time. Now, about early 1800s, there was an English doctor called William Prout. You may have heard of his name. He believed that we only needed three principal constituents of food. Everything else was kind of useless in his hypothesis, in his theory. And those were proteins, carbs, and fat, right? You all know that. So he believed that all humans needed to survive and thrive was actually having proteins, carbs, and fat. So he started kind of breaking apart. And if you can believe it, they used to do experiments on human infants to test this. And this is not legal today. But they tested that if you give human infants just protein, carbs, and fat, it should be enough. Well, as you can imagine, that was not enough. And they found out that these babies were actually not only not thriving, they were actually almost not surviving. So another scientist came along whose name was Justus von Liebig, and he basically said, okay, this protein, carbs, and fat alone is not enough, but he believed that there were three additional ingredients that was necessary and sufficient to add to the three other ingredients for us to basically survive. And he added phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. He was called the father of nutrition science, and you'll learn why. So they tried this. So they added protein, carbs, and fat, phosphorus, and potassium, and nitrogen. Well, did it fix the problem? Not really. There was still something missing. That was not enough. Then they went back into their, lab benches and realized, there are these things in food that are called vitamins and minerals, and there's this thing called fiber. Okay, so maybe this is the last three things that we are missing. Did it work? You guessed it. It did not. So this was sort of around the time where the scientific eating or nutritionism actually came to existence. Emerged around early 1900s, and that basically was the time where people started, especially with scientists at the time, like the ones I just mentioned, focusing on nutrients rather than whole foods. They really simplified the process. They simplified a very complex process. We think whole food is really simple, but it's not. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of interaction goes on with the whole food. So they started isolating vitamins from fruits and vegetables, which is where they are normally. And they thought that this was the final constituents that people need this was what was missing from Prout and Liebig's formula. And this kind of started the scientific eating. Excuse me. And it continued, of course, in the 1970s, a little bit later, we basically shifted from eating food to eating macronutrients. You all have heard about macronutrients, are familiar with that. Yes, put it in the chat and I see it later, but I know that you all have heard about it. Now, that is when we basically stopped thinking about whole food. Now I'm going to ask you this question, and you can answer it in the chat just to yourself. Do you think that our ancestors, the cavemen, went and sat in their cave every day and did the calculation to see, I need so many percentages of carbs and so much percentage of my calories are going to be fat and so many of it is going to be from protein, and calculated that and then went outside to hunt? Not likely, right? This was all later as we thought we became smarter. And that was really influenced by a lot of advances that was made in food sciences and food biochemistry. So they started emphasizing on these components that they thought were enough. And basically, this led to a lot of dietary guidelines that came about in the early 70s. And of course, the introduction of supplements and vitamins came about. And really, it changed people's way of thinking about food as a whole, holistic thing into more of an analytic, scientific thing. In short, they started taking food apart and adding the components that they thought was most important back together. And again, oversimplifying the complexity of whole foods. Now, I have to mention something about supplements. And it's funny because the name says it, supplements. Supplements are not supposed to replace food. They're supposed to supplement for things that maybe are missing or deficient, or we're not getting enough food because of the way our food system works. But this really wasn't the initial idea. So what's wrong with scientific eating? You're wondering, you're seeing a scientist talking about this and say scientific eating is wrong. Absolutely correct. And I will tell you, I will first want to tell you, as a scientist, scientific eating is wrong. For one, whole food is not equal to some of its parts, because there's so much more into whole food than we can actually take apart and analyze each part. There's so much more to it. Humans cannot survive, and this was shown obviously through illegal experimentation. Well, they were not then, but now they are. They can't survive, let alone thrive, on micro and macronutrients alone. It is impossible for us to, in fact, survive on those things. And more importantly, cutting out any single component from our natural diet is not going to work. For any species, the natural diet should remain the same. If you take any one major component out, that species is not going to survive. For humans, the same. We cannot cut any one category or component of our natural diet and expect to actually thrive. We might survive, but it's not thriving, it's not healthy living, and not for long. And all of the food constituents are necessary and needed for to support health in their natural and original state, not broken apart and put together. Really, it doesn't work to do that. So that is what's wrong with scientific eating. Now came the timeline of diets, because obviously a lot of things was going wrong, and we're trying to analyze the food and figure out how they can simplify this. But it didn't really work. And I always jokingly say, there are as many diets on the planet as there are people. It's a little exaggeration, but really there are. In the 1938, there was this thing called imitation rule, and many of you may have heard about that. And that was a rule that basically had been passed by the FDA, that any food that had something that wasn't real, was imitation food, in other words, was fake, had to be labeled as imitation food. But then in the 1970s, food manufacturers realized that, well, this isn't going to work. If you put a unreal, fake label on something, it's not going to sell, right? Although I have to laugh because it sells today, unfortunately. But when you label something fake, they're going to lose sales of that. So FDA basically was forced by food manufacturing companies and giants to remove the imitation rule. Basically, now they didn't have to put a fake label on foods. But still, there was something missing. There was problems with our health and our weight. So somebody started saying, okay, it has to be the fats. Many of you may remember the era of evil fats started in the early 70s. So the enemy was fat, obviously, because population was gaining weight, we were getting fat, and it had to be basically the fat, right? So they started replacing natural fats, taking the food out, creating fake things such as margarine, and basically made everything non-fat. But at what expense? Because if you take all the fat out, especially natural fats, there's not much taste left to food. So they added salt and sugar to make this tasty, of course, and people started gaining weight. By the way, margarine, as you know it, later on was found to be worse than animal fat, and in fact is carcinogenic. So there you have it. All right, so removing the fat out of our diet didn't work because people started actually gaining more weight. So they said, okay, so it has to be the protein. In the 1980s, if you remember, John Harvey Kellogg and C.W. Post, remember Kellogg and Post, that sounds familiar, suggested that protein was the evil culprit. That's the one that was making us unhealthy and fat. So they removed the protein out of our morning meals, especially. That's when the eggs became evil, and replaced it with cereals and carbs. These men were very brilliant. They were extremely smart businessmen. And basically, by promoting this idea, they became multi-millionaires, and they still are, I'm sure. So that's when the breakfast cereals came about. And oh my gosh, not only was it supposedly what was going to save us from getting fat and sick, but also was something novel. And of course, it's sugar, so it's addictive. So people began to eat it a lot more, and well, people began to gain even more weight. That was actually when the official obesity epidemic started. Now, I want you to think back for a few seconds. If you ever watch old movies, like movies in the 50s and 60s, if you haven't noticed this, go ahead and look one time. You're like in a scene of an old movie where people are on the beach. You look at that and there is almost nobody obese. Everybody is a normal, healthy weight. Now, if you look at a current picture or a movie, just think about a picture where there's a public place where there's a lot of people. Pay attention. The majority of people are overweight. That is when all of those problems happen. Well, there you have it. And it breaks my heart to even go to the grocery stores today and still see these things on the shelves, right? You all see them. That is when the obesity epidemic started. Okay, so carbs didn't help either. And cutting out protein wasn't the solution. So then became 1990s and the era of evil carbs. You all remember Atkins and South Beach and all of those low carb diets. And along with that, the fiber died, right? And more digestive issues, among other things, started happening. Okay, so now we are lost. We have no idea what to eat. We don't know what's right and what's wrong. And we all need a nutritionist or somebody like me to tell us what to eat and what not to eat. But on the other hand, there is much more chronic illness than ever before. There are more childhood and youth cancers than ever before. And as a person who works with a lot of people with cancer and chronic conditions, I can't believe the types of cancers that I come across on a regular basis. That is like, what is that? And where did that come from? And there are so many new diseases that fit into what I call the unsolved mysteries. So many people come to me with a long list of things that are wrong, and they are real, and a long list of labs and a long list of medications, and nobody knows what's going on, and nobody can figure out, and they keep feeling worse, and they keep taking more medications, and they keep having to medicate the side effect of medication. So this is the era of confusion. But not only that, is that we forgot what health really means. So according to World Health Organization, this is the definition of health. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not only the absence of disease or infirmity. Now, I ask this question oftentimes, how many people do you know that can say with confidence and honesty that they have absolutely no health concerns? They are absolutely at their optimal health. They love their body. They exercise, they move about without any limitations. They can do whatever they want without anything stopping them. They don't take any medications, and they sleep like a baby. They don't stress. And when they go to the doctor, they have a very blank file, which is called the boring file. How many people can you count around you that can say that? It's not very many. Unfortunately, the definition of health has also changed. We are in an era where they promote being overweight and healthy. You're okay, you're beautiful. Women are told that they're beautiful. Of course, they are beautiful. It has nothing to do with beauty. When you carry extra weight, it is extra stress on your body. Evolutionarily, we are not meant or designed to do that. We are not meant to eat certain things that do certain things to our bodies. It has nothing to do with appearances. Appearances are superficial, easy to fix, but really it is true health, which is very hard to come by these days. Now, you may or may not have heard about the 3-4-50 initiative. This is an initiative that many years ago actually started in Vermont, the state where I live today. But actually, these statistics and these rules or initiatives apply nationwide. And this was called 3-4-50. There are 3 behaviors that lead to 4 major diseases that account for more than 50% of deaths in Vermont at the time, which is basically applies to the country nationwide. Behaviors were initially no physical activity, poor diet, and tobacco use. I am adding alcohol use to this because in my mind, alcohol and tobacco are one and the same. Yes, I said it, and I repeat. Alcohol and tobacco are one and the same. The only thing is that alcohol is more accepted. But remember, 20, 30 years ago, tobacco was also accepted. There were doctors and oncologists who would sit in their office and smoke cigarettes while they examined their patients. Alcohol is a known carcinogen, among other things. So I add that to the behaviors, alcohol and tobacco use. 4 diseases are cancer, heart disease and stroke, type 2 diabetes and lung disease that account for more than 50% of all deaths in the United States. Remember those numbers, 3-4-50. It's a powerful statistic, but it's absolutely true. So what have we learned or can we learn from our evolution? Again, if you remember what I just said at the beginning of this, let's go back the way we were, the first true humans, which were called handyman, right? Their lifestyle was active. They were moving about. Their appearance was small and lean. And their diet was 40% animal-based protein, 60% vegetation and fat. They did minimal processing and they had a healthy relationship with food. Many of these societies went hunting as a community. Some of the people in the community went, say the younger and the more stronger went hunting. When they hunted a large animal like a buffalo, they carried that large animal, sometimes upwards of 18 miles, back to their village, to their community. Once they got there, they celebrated this meal with the entire community. They did not waste any parts of this buffalo. And they shared, they didn't abuse, and they celebrated this together. So food was something celebratory. It was something that was shared, and it was something that wasn't obtained by means of abusing the animal or the environment. They respected their natural environment. They didn't destroy it. And that was what the healthy relationship with food and environment was. So where are we today? In my practice, unfortunately, I see that a lot and I hear that a lot. Food has become enemy. And cooking food has become an annoying chore for a lot of people. And most people don't even know or care where their food comes from. And that makes a huge impact on how you view food and the relationship you have with food and therefore with your health. Food is something that needs to be enjoyed. Cooking is something that needs to be enjoyed, and it's not a chore. It's not a nuisance. It is something that has to be cherished. Knowing where your food comes from really, really makes it that much more meaningful and make you appreciate your food. I oftentimes tell people, I know the farmer where I get my wild game and all grass-fed and pasture-raised animals. I know them, they're friends. So every time I sit down to eat my meal, I think about Brian and Kara, the couple who own the farm, Yankee Farmers Market, where I get all of my protein. I know where that comes from. Where I live in Vermont, at least for a few months in a year, I grow my own vegetables. At least I know where that comes from. Try to stay local. Try to know your farmers. It's hard for a lot of people, depending on where you live, but really trying to appreciate, even if you really don't know the farmer like I do, but realize that there is somebody working hard behind the scenes to get you that food. And slow down to think about how this healthy, wonderful food is going to make you feel. And of course, thinking about the price of your health. One thing I oftentimes hear too is eating healthy and being healthy is expensive. It really, really isn't when you think about it. But when you think about the alternative, the cost of illness is a whole lot more. Just imagine one simple prescription for type 2 diabetes. It's amazing how much people have to spend on their prescription medications or their hospital bills, chemo treatments, all of that. When you put all of that together, is really food the most expensive thing we should worry about? And what is the price of your health? So here's some food for thought. I'm, by the way, a car fanatic, so I love cars. I always use cars in my every talk almost I give. So this is the most expensive car in the world. The last time I checked, it's a Rolls-Royce, the La Rose Noir Droptail. This car costs approximately $30 million. Now, you have this car, and they tell you at the dealership, you have to put a specific special kind of gasoline in there that costs about $25 a gallon. And the oil in this car is very, very special. You have to change it every 3 months, and it's, I don't know, $60 a quart. And those are the things you need. Of course, you will do that. You will pay however much that costs for that gasoline and the oil and everything that you need to do to keep this $30 million car going. Now, if I asked you, just for fun, would you put sand in the tank every once in a while, like say once a month? You would think I'm absolutely out of my mind, right? Now, if you, God forbid, wreck this car, you can buy another one. You can borrow one. You can rent one, right? You can replace that. Now, it never fails to amaze me, blows my mind. People would never imagine putting something in their car that doesn't belong, like that sand in the tank once a month. But they never hesitate to put something in their bodies that absolutely doesn't belong. Now, I always say you can replace that car, right? But your one and only body, it's the one and only one you got. You can't buy one. You can't rent one. You can't borrow one. This is it. So now what's the price? It is priceless, right? There is no price you can put on your health. So it is important to invest in your health and not think about it as costs of eating or being healthy. Not only just food, but costs of having a healthy lifestyle, whether it be your exercise, your mental health, your mindfulness, all of those things. They are investment you make in yourself and not cost. I like to end with this quote, and it is mine. It is that your spoon can deliver the most powerful medicine or the most toxic poison. It is your hand that fills the spoon. So it is up to you what goes into your spoon. And likely in your plate. If there is times when we feel we have absolutely no control over anything, there is one thing you have control over, and it's how you treat your body. What you put in your body, how you treat your body. You have 100% control over that, and that is the good news. So today, for all of you here, I want to share a gift with you. This is a simple one-pager guide, but there's a lot of information on there. And this is a healthy plate. It's based on my eating philosophy and based on what I just told you throughout this whole presentation. So my basic philosophy is eating like our human ancestors did, eating like Mother Nature intended. Oftentimes I get asked, do you follow the paleo diet or the Atkins diet or the keto diet or all of those things? No. If diets worked, we wouldn't need another one every 3 months. So no, there is no diet, except that if you think of diet as a way of eating, and a human diet is supposed to be like our ancestors. So we are supposed to get primarily our proteins from animal-based proteins, but in their natural state, animals that have been fed what they are naturally supposed to eat, just like us. And plant-based is only for carbohydrates, and our fats come from animal-based fat in nuts and seeds. Simple as that. So this healthy plate guide is something you can put on your refrigerator. It's a one-pager. And there are kind of simple examples on the bottom. And it's an easy way to basically incorporate those guidelines, those principles of human evolutionary diet into your life. If you have to read a label and somebody like me has to translate what they mean, it's likely not food. I also call things artificial foods. Not only say your Beyond Burger, which is fake meat made by somebody in the lab like myself, or animal meats that are not fed the food they're supposed to eat, even if they are animals, meaning grain-fed animal proteins. So I will put a link in the chat, or I will share this link with Dan also later if you missed it. So you can actually download this plate and you can refer to it if you like. This is my gift to you. Just a very, very small introduction into my world of eating and nutrition. And I'm going to stop talking here and ask you guys, or actually I will look in the chat probably to see if there are any questions. I'm going to stop sharing. And actually, I'm going to look for that link, which I forgot to get out early on. How's everybody doing? Did I put you to sleep?
No, I thought it was great.
Good.
I have questions for sure.
Of
So
course.
I'm just asking everybody to unmute in case they want to ask a question, just to make sure that
Absolutely.
I get it right here. Yeah.
Nice.
I did put your link to your website in the chat, but I
Okay.
don't have the
No, I
link.
will put I'm trying to see if I can find the chat here. Okay, there we go. All right, so here is the link to my healthy plate. So click on that and download it for yourself. And let's see. I'm looking in the chat to see if you have any questions.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I raised my hand. So I was wondering, what are the current most common or experimental methods of treating cancer and their respective efficacies?
I'm sorry, I missed. What are the current? Repeat that again. I'm
Like
sorry.
most current common or experimental methods of treating cancer and their respective efficacies in terms of like percentages.
Oh, wow, there's so many. When I was in cancer research, one of the most up and coming, which is still going, is immunotherapy, which Dan was reading my bio. So immunotherapy is one of the major up-and-coming methods of cancer therapy that basically uses the person's own immune system to target cancer cells. And I found that fascinating. I worked on multiple myeloma when I was in clinical research, and multiple myeloma is a sort of a different kind of cancer. In a way, it's unique because the bone marrow is loaded with cancer, but the blood is clean. So my research involved taking the blood from the patients, giving them a certain growth factors called cytokines to basically load the blood with these natural killer cells and T cells that basically attack cancer, and then put them back into the patient. Now, the benefit of that is that it's patient's own blood cells, so they won't reject it, and it actually doesn't really have all the effects of, say, chemotherapy, which is basically attacks everything. So that is one of the sort of most current up and coming. You may have heard about CAR T cells. And there are a lot of phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials going on for breast cancer, hematologic malignancies, many kind of cancer, lung cancer, that use these CAR T cells because it's a proportion of your immune cells, T cells, that are basically what I call them soldiers. They're frontline soldiers, and they kill everything, including pathogens and invaders, as well as cancer. Well, we can use these T cells and program them to target cancer cells, and those are some of the few. But there's, I mean, there are so many different kinds of cancer, and I actually have a workshop on that. People think cancer is one disease, but it isn't. It's over 120 types of different diseases, and it's still coming. So for every single one of them, there are variations of types of therapy. Questions about cancer and potentially autism being caused by pesticides. I'm not sure what you mean by questions about cancer. Oh, cancer potentially being caused by pesticides or autism. So pesticides or glyphosates, definitely there are many of them that have been shown to be carcinogenic. So I highly recommend trying to avoid the glyphosates and pesticides. And in fact, if you are on if you pay attention to environmental working group at all, I recommend you get on their email list, because they oftentimes share invaluable information about a lot of these things. And if you think about it, a lot of these chemicals, glyphosates, are banned in most of the other countries in the world because they're so toxic. As far as autism goes, there are some research that shows that a link between certain types of chemicals, including these glyphosates, and autism. I'm not 100% sure that it is a cause and effect, but definitely creates an environment for that to be sort of nurtured. I firmly believe in epigenetics, which is basically your genes are only a blueprint or only a start, but your epigenetics is what dictates how those genes are going to express and behave. So let's see. Has there been any studies or anything showing where fasting eliminates cancer cells? I say this because fasting, all the cells repair themselves as given appropriate time. So great question. Very controversial. Yes, people have claimed that fasting does help kill cancer cells, but I personally happen to not agree. And the reason for it is this. Imagine a battlefield where you have the enemies and then you have your soldiers on the battlefield, right? Facing each other. Now, imagine that you're going to starve everybody. Who is going to benefit? Do you think your soldiers are going to actually be able to function and kill the enemy while starving? So if you're starving everything. You're also starving your immune system cells. And your immune system cells need fuel in order to create those cytokines and have the capacity to actually fight cancer or any other disease. So I personally firmly am against complete fasting. Not only for that, for many other reasons as well, because your body needs nutrients to function properly. It's like having a Lamborghini and don't put fuel in it. It won't go far, right? It's the same thing. Going off Jessica's question, what are your thoughts on consumption of raw dairy as opposed to pasteurized dairy? Okay, this is simple yet complicated. Have you ever seen a goat breastfeeding of a cow? Have you ever seen an adult cow breastfeeding of an adult cow? No, right? Okay, dairy has a specific biological purpose. In mammals, dairy is there to fuel a newborn and provide with all kinds of nutrients and antibodies to support the survival, to support the life of a newborn until weaning age. So for humans, for example, weaning age is about age 2. Now, Mother Nature knows we have genes that encode proteins and enzymes to break down mother's milk until weaning age. After age 2, our genes that made the enzymes to break down mother's milk shut down because we don't waste energy making something we don't use anymore. Now, you never had enzymes to break down a cow's milk or a goat's milk, raw or pasteurized. Never do. Cow's milk for calves, human milk for babies, until weaning age. It's as simple as that. But it is complex because it has been introduced in our diet as a healthy food. No, it isn't. Dairy is supposed to serve a purpose naturally until weaning age. I will give you one very interesting story. When I was in graduate school, I worked with mice. And mice weaning age is 3 weeks, 21 days. If, as a silly, forgetful graduate student, you forgot to wean your mice from the mom, this is what would happen. The pups will start breastfeeding, the mom will beat them up because they're supposed to stop. And they keep trying because that's what they do. And if you didn't take the pups away from mom in the same cage, the mother would kill them because they're supposed to stop breastfeeding. That's just the way nature is. So whether it's raw or pasteurized or goat's milk or whatever other animal's milk, no, it isn't. Humans aren't supposed to consume other animals' milk or milk products. In college in the environmental science classes, they said very small percentage of pesticides are actually tested. That is true. They are. In fact, in the United States, there are not very much because, are you ready for this? I worked for Monsanto before graduate school. So yes, I know about Roundup and Roundup Ready are actually genetically modified organisms. That's why I don't eat them. So a lot of those glyphosate and pesticides are formulated in the United States by Monsanto and 2 other companies. So they are kind of passed through the testing criteria, if you will, with money. So you are correct. Many of them aren't really accurately tested for their long-term effect on human health. Let's see.
I have a question,
Yeah.
and then I'll let AK go. But he asked one so far, so it's my turn. Then he could go
Yeah.
next. So as you know, Dr. Lale, I'm into the microbiome, right? And I know how important the microbiome is, and most people really aren't educated about the microbiome, that we have more microbiome and bacteria than we have cells in our body. And when we're eating, really, we're eating for this synergistic relationship that we have with the microbiome that handles a lot of the metabolic pathways and things that, help us survive and, prevent us from getting diseases and cancers. Can you talk a little bit about that and how, we really need to start learning about, educate ourselves about, the importance of, we're not just eating as if we're just a human being, we're eating because we have this synergistic relationship and how that plays into everything.
Absolutely. We actually have an ecosystem in there, right? So I'm glad you brought that up because nowadays, more and more, fortunately, talks and studies come about gut microbiome and gut health. But it's nothing new, but we have forgotten the importance because your gut is really it's your immune system. Most of your immune system is in the gut. So yes, you were right about billions and billions of really great bacteria in our gut that do a lot of different functions in our day-to-day life, including protecting us from everyday pathogens and invaders that we are exposed to on a second basis. Everywhere you go, on this desk, you breathe, whatever you do, you are exposed to so many things. If it wasn't for your immune system and your gut microbiome, you'd be, oh my gosh, sick all the time and dead, right? So we're lucky to have that. But there is also, you must have heard about the gut-brain axis. It's also your second brain, right? So there is this vicious cycle, right, that goes on. And one of the major issues with our modern eating is that we have almost, I always say, almost 99% of clients that come to me for the first time have a leaky gut. You all have heard about that, I'm sure. And there are things in our diet that actually are the major culprits for causing a leaky gut. For those of you who, I'm sure this group is very well educated. If you are in Dan's group, I'm sure about that. But basically what it is that there are holes into your intestinal wall. Basically, that's what causes leaky gut. Your digestive system is supposed to be a closed system from mouth to anus. There isn't any leaks anywhere, right? And there is a beautiful harmony and balance in that ecosystem in your gut between all of the bacteria that are in there, which function to keep us healthy, digest our food, and many, many other things, right? Now you can imagine there are holes in your intestinal wall, and food comes in and doesn't get completely digested and leaks out of the abdominal, out of the digestive system into the abdominal cavity where it's never supposed to be, right? And then sometimes it also ends up in the bloodstream without being properly digested. So things go in and out. Now, opportunistic things like candida and other things in your gut take over and kill the good bacteria. And now you have the chaos going on, right? Have you heard so many people these days are bloated and have gas even if they drink water? Right? It shouldn't be that way, right? Your gut is telling you something. So that is the cause of a lot of health issues, and it doesn't always manifest itself as digestive issues. People may have no digestive symptoms and they have leaky gut. They could have brain fog, right? We talked about the gut-brain axis. So that is a huge health problem, and it is honestly the root cause of a lot of health issues, chronic conditions that personally I see. The first thing I do, I start addressing the gut health. And number one thing we have to do is eliminate the root cause of what's poking those holes in your intestine. And then the good news is you can repair that and you can restore your gut health. It takes time, but you can't go back to the way that things started, right? It's, it's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing, expecting different results, which is what I hear a lot. People kind of adopt a healthy lifestyle. We correct everything, we heal the gut, and we restore the health. And then 6 months later, like, okay, now when can I go back and do this? Well, why would you do that? Right? If it worked before, why did you stop? If it didn't work, why would you do it again? So I can go on and on about gut health, but it is, in my opinion, one of the major causes of majority of chronic conditions. That's where it all starts, and then it goes out from there. A lot of it. So great question. This is a topic.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that, and talking about that, and you kind of, nailed it with the last part, which is the mindset piece. Like 6 months later, people think they healed themselves.
Right.
And that's why it's so important that, when you want to treat somebody whole, that it's not just treating them physically, but you also have to treat them emotionally.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of skills that people don't learn. Like, okay, what is a habit? A cue, a routine, and a reward. If you don't change the habit that was causing that, then that thing that you said 6 months from now, they're going to go back and repeat the process. So it's like, there's more to this than just fixing the physical part. You also have to learn, like, how do I become my own cognitive-based therapist? What is neuroplasticity? How do I change a thought? Mindfulness, like all the things that you we're
Yeah.
mentioning are like so important that it's not just like, okay, I'm going to go to a nutritionist and they're going to help me eat
Go
right
on a diet, right?
and go on a diet. Yeah, it's
Right.
everything that you said. It's also what are the skills mentally and emotionally that I need to put in my tool chest that'll help me maintain and create the lifestyle, because it's a
Exactly.
lifestyle, right? It's not just
Yeah, I call it a life plan. Think about people are like on the plan. No, it's your life plan. And you brought up neuroplasticity. That's interest, absolutely amazing, important thing, because you all know that you can actually change your brain waves to behave different way. Like literally something that you loved 10 years ago and you never thought you could live without, you can look at it now and say, well, literally, it can happen. And it, like Dan said, has a lot to do with training your mindset and really changing habits long term. And that's why I don't believe in diets, because diets don't work. Absolutely right. Taking probiotic supplements, would you recommend it? Great question. So here's my opinion on probiotics versus prebiotics. We talk about gut health, right? So I recommend probiotics in cases where one has been taking antibiotics and they need to quickly restore the good gut bacteria, right? That's good for that. I don't think everyone should always take probiotics. The reason for this is this. Prebiotics is more important because prebiotics is actually the food that feeds those bacteria, right? Okay, so you need to keep them fed. You don't need to bring new people in, new players in. That's basically what probiotics are. If you had antibiotic treatment, you killed off your good bacteria a lot, you need to quickly bring more soldiers in, if you will, right? And kind of restore that. But if you already have restored that and you want to maintain, it's kind of like your lawn that you grow, like so you basically are fertilizing these good bacteria. That's prebiotic. And a lot of foods actually serve prebiotic, but there is prebiotic supplements because honestly, not everyone gets enough of them in their diet. So, great question. You can take, there are supplements that have pre-pro both together, which is fine, but you don't necessarily have to take probiotics all the time. But I believe you need to take prebiotics all the time because the way our food system has changed, unfortunately, even the healthiest eaters probably will not get enough prebiotics from their diet. Coffee alternatives such as malt water that contain reishi mushrooms, lion's mane. What are your thoughts on that? Are these supposed to be better substitutions? So I get this question a lot. Are you going to make me stop drinking coffee? No. So here's the deal. Real coffee, good quality coffee, has actually a lot of polyphenols and antioxidants that can help your health. The key thing is dosage and how you drink your coffee. Right now, I don't drink coffee anymore. I drink tons of tea. If you saw me, maybe when you came in, I'm drinking black tea right now. But the alternative things like malt water, which I'm familiar with, I don't think there is any better or worse. Those things have huge benefits. Lion's mane and reishi mushrooms, all of those are great. But coffee also has benefits. Now, here's the deal. One, if you're putting cream and sugar in your coffee, well, you kind of ruin the coffee benefits, right? But if you are somebody, and I have this a lot, people who are sensitive to caffeine and coffee, and they get jittery, for example, or whatever it affects them, but they want something like that. Those are great alternatives without those, effects, if you will. But I wouldn't say one or the other. It's just a matter of personal preference and then really how you drink your coffee. You can also put cream and sugar in the malt water too. I've seen people do that, which ruins the benefits. But in my mind, those both are good. It's a matter of preference. So if you like your coffee, make sure it is good sourced, organic. It's not decaf because decaf coffee is not good for you. I've actually decaffeinated coffee myself in undergrad, and that is not coffee. It is solvents you're drinking at the end of that. So drink coffee. If you don't want caffeine, don't drink coffee. Basically, that's how it is. And those alternatives are good. I think it's just personal preference and what you put in them. Good questions. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I was wondering, you referred that dairy is not a good thing per se to have because of the weaning of milk in mammals. But what about fermented dairy, things like kefir or hard cheese or soft cheese? Um, from my understanding, it's minimally processed, or it's processed using natural things, whether it's lemon juice or citric acid or casein itself or things along those lines. Does it still remain dairy? I mean, clearly it's classified as that as from nutritionists, but I was curious to know your take on that versus milk itself or
Good
yogurt and stuff like
question.
that.
Great question, AK. That question comes out a lot. So the idea is not processing and the source of milk or how it's prepared. The idea is this: anything that comes from another animal's milk, initially, that is basically what it's made of, whether it be cheese or kefir or yogurt or whatever. So imagine this: in every mammalian species, there are species specific growth hormones for that mammalian species newborn to grow. So bovine growth hormone for cows, calves to grow into a 1,000-pound cow, human growth hormones for babies. And every species that produces milk, mammals, have species specific growth hormones. Okay, so whether it be fermented or raw or pasteurized, made into yogurt, cottage cheese, whatever it is, it does have those growth hormones. Now, I will tell you one other piece of information I didn't say. There are 3 types of cancer that are directly linked to the consumption of dairy products. Take a guess what they are: prostate cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer. Now, 2 out of 3 are hormone related. Does that make sense now? Right? We are consuming hormones that don't belong to us. Our body doesn't process them. It's never supposed to have those growth hormones. So that's one big issue. And of course, the colon is the digestive system. So that's another thing. So it isn't really, and it's a good question, but oftentimes comes up, well, how about kefir? How about yogurt? How about raw milk? How about goat milk? So it is from another animal species. It is specific to that animal species. So we didn't have the tools to break them down and process them, and we never did. So basically, that's what it is. So anything that comes from an animal milk, whether it be any form or shape, I don't recommend that it's healthy. Although there's tons of people that argue against that, but that's my belief. And in my practice, I can tell you 100% of the time, 100% of the time, I get rid of a lot of ailments and issues with cutting down dairy. Simple as that. I see it every single time. And yes, follow-up question. You had raised your hand, I think. Is that a question?
Yeah, I was just waiting for the unmute button. Yeah, follow-up question was, has there been any studies for, let's say, the type of cow, whether and also what their diet, if they're having soy-based product versus their grass-fed, and versus if they're injected with the bovine growth hormone versus producing offsprings with colostrum, and
Mhm.
then their natural process of producing dairy itself. Because it's again, I'm not setting my ground on milk. I'll be honest with you, I don't drink milk.
Oh
I have
no,
my
that's
own
fine.
reasons, but for the people that do, um,
Mhm.
I would like to know if there have been studies along those lines, because there've been talks of putting masks on cows and so on and so forth, but I find it personally pathetic, since if they were to have grass instead of soy, um,
Mhm.
and or meals and stuff along those lines, it's just a natural process that won't burp as much. I mean, it's the same thing that happens to me if I eat pinto beans, you know? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So you bring up a great point. So what the cows eat has a lot to do with how it affects, what we consume. So whether you're talking about the milk products, so there are people, promoters of dairy, that do say that if you have the cow eating grass versus soy or grains, it makes a difference in the milk. And that is absolutely true. And let me tell you why. Cows are not supposed to consume grains, just like humans are. It was never part of their diet. So they're supposed to eat the grass, which has the chlorophyll, which gets all the omegas from the sunlight, and that makes the meat and everything else about that cow healthy and natural. Now, with respect to meat, I will say not all meat are created equal. So if you're eating grain-fed meat, horrible. I'd say that's fake meat because it's not natural. Now, the cow not only is not supposed to eat the grain, soy or corn or whatever grain, that compromises, Dan, you're gonna love this, the gut microbiome of the cow. So the cow's gut microbiome all messed up. His or her immune system is all messed up. And now also on top of that, the omega-3 to 6 ratios of the fat, whether it be milk or meat, is completely out of whack. So a normal omega-3 to 6 ratio in a grass-fed animal, whether it be cow or chicken or whatever, is 1:3 or 1:4. That's a normal ratio, perfectly healthy. When you have grain-fed animals, that omega-3 to 6 ratio in the fat gets to, take a guess, 1:40. That is cardiotoxic. So whether it be tilapia that is farmed and grain-fed, chickens that are grain-fed, or the cow that is grain-fed, it's just as bad. So whether it be applying to milk or meat is the same concept. So you bring up a good point. Now, I don't promote drinking dairy or consuming dairy in general, but there is definitely a difference between either the milk or the meat of a grass-fed, pasture-raised cow versus a grain-fed cow. There's no doubt about it. It's completely different, and I do believe that. Should we drink that milk? I don't think so. But I hope that kind of answers your question.
So you talked about wheat, and I think, we have 15, or I should say 13 more minutes. I think this would be a good opportunity, a good segue into talking about, we kind of pretty much covered the dairy, but you had made some really great points in your PowerPoint presentation about how we started to need to, and we did this during the war, like when World War II, World War I, really around those time where we really increased the grain because we had to learn in corn, and we needed to feed these people right quickly. And we kind of developed an issue that we somehow decided that, because you had mentioned about cows eating grass, and they're supposed to eat grass, but humans aren't supposed to eat grass, right? And all these things like wheat and these things are really considered grasses. So, and then, the buzzword in the community and is gluten, gluten, gluten. And, one of the
Not
things,
the gluten.
one of the things that I really try to tell people, it's not gluten, it's gliadin. It's the protein that is what
All of the
rips
proteins and the grains. Yep.
that rips the
Absolutely
junction
right.
up in the gut. So can you give a little bit of insight on, and help us, learn about when you hear gluten, it's not really about the gluten, it's about the gliadin and the proteins that cause the issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. So I actually personally detest the gluten-free movement. It's another diet fad. In fact, gluten-free products are much worse. I'd say drop it. So this is what basically what I believe and what I have read is that, so grains in general, all grains, gluten and not gluten, gluten-free, are never supposed to be part of our human evolutionary diet. You're right. We got lazy, we got cheap, and like I said, instead of eating the cow, we milk the cow, and instead of eating the meat and vegetables, we're eating grains because it's cheaper, right? Of course, we also feed the grains to animals to fatten them up. Now, an animal that's fattened up fast, what happens to us, right? there comes the obesity epidemic, right? So if you think about all grains, they have 3 layers. Now I'm gonna also be very controversial here again. I'm an outlaw if you believe me. So they're exoderm, the endoderm, and the mesoderm. And all parts of these, they have many different types of proteins, gliadins, glutens, and others where we as humans, cows, chickens, turkeys, especially fish at the bottom of the sea, never had the enzymes to break down. Now, historically, it's known that if you take a whole grain, one grain, and leave it in the dark for a few hundred years, and then take that out and give it water and light, it will germinate. Think about that. What does that exoderm do? It protects that. It is that rough, right? Now, what makes your whole wheat bread whole? It's that exoderm, right? Now, we never had the enzymes to break down any of these proteins, so we don't digest them. What happens is that they get incompletely broken down, and I like to describe them as sawdust. Okay, think about it. Sawdust, tiny, tiny particles, but they're kind of sharp. And they get into your intestine and they poke those holes in the walls. And they wreck your immune system, they wreck your gut lining, and they create leaky gut. So it isn't gluten that's causing that. It is the whole grain. And I'm not promoting not eating whole grain, or honestly, if you think about white bread and whole bread, whole wheat bread, they're almost as bad, but the whole part of that makes it even more toxic. So it isn't gluten. I always say to my clients who have gluten sensitivity, like celiac or Crohn's, I say you are lucky because your body has a gauge that's sensitive enough to reject it, makes you sick so you can't eat it. The rest of us are not that lucky, right? We are told it's good for us. FDA says 7 servings of grain, whole grains every day. Oh my God, I would die if I ate that. 7 servings of whole grain? Are you serious? So no, it isn't the gluten, but it is, you're right, absolutely all the proteins in the grain that we were never supposed to have. And it just was introduced into our diet as a convenient, cheap food. So gluten-free grains, most commonly rice, corn, right? They're worse. I told you I worked for Monsanto. Corn, as you know it, is a genetically modified organism. If it's yellow or cream color, and if you can eat it, it's a genetically modified organism, right? And rice has arsenic, which is a known carcinogen, on top of being a grain. Has nothing to do with gluten. So no, it isn't just, I actually don't like the gluten-free products. So they're highly processed too. They're made with corn or rice, and they're highly processed. So gluten-free is another fad, much like, I don't know, Atkins or fat-free or whatever. And people often say, yeah, I've gotten gluten, I've cut gluten. I'm like, that's probably not really great because you probably replaced it with corn and rice, which is even worse. So yeah, that's a great point. And here's another question if we have time. So anti-nutrients found in vegetables like oxalates. And so those are specific. So there are oxalates in some vegetables and some foods. And I don't necessarily call those complete anti-nutrients because it doesn't apply to everyone unless you have, for example, a propensity for kidney stones or gallbladder stones. And I've had many people with those, and we kind of monitor that. So I wouldn't call them necessarily always bad. And there is this, unfortunately, sometimes there are some schools of thought that just mislead the public, like all nightshades are bad, cut them all out. All oxalates are bad, cut them. It's not true. You know, for certain populations, certain nightshades may cause them some inflammatory issues. Not for everyone. Oxalates are there. I don't have kidney stones, so I eat things with oxalates all the time. It doesn't bother me. But if somebody has that, in fact, today one of my clients had kidney stones. I'm like, oh, okay, so we need to go on an oxalate low diet for a while. So I don't say everybody should be concerned about that, Vivian, but every individual is different, and we have to think about these things as individual case to case. So not everyone, like I said, like nightshades, like oxalates, it becomes like people are afraid of eating a lot of things. So you shouldn't be afraid of that. If there is a reason for us to eliminate something, sure. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it's almost
Almost time.
yeah, but I was thinking about like you know, how we as practitioners use elimination diets, and people will do like blood work to see what they are kind of having food sensitivities for. And that's kind of a good way, I guess, if you have children, it's hard to kind of deal with that. But really the tried and true way of really knowing if something is actually uh, responsive or not good for your body or good for your body is really eliminating it for a couple of weeks and then reintroducing it. Would you agree with that, or do you think there's other ways of figuring that out, what's good? Because everybody is unique, like you had said.
True. And so to some extent, yes, that is a good strategy. Um, Not an ultimate best strategy. I will tell you why. So you can eliminate, and many people do. By the way, a lot of the tests, food sensitivity tests, I will take that with a grain of salt. No pun intended, but they're not always accurate. But it is helpful to, if you're really not knowing what's causing certain issues, there are obvious culprits, if you will, that practitioners can use and say, okay, let's cut these out for like 8 to 12 weeks. And really, it takes a lot, generally about 12 weeks to really establish a concrete, basis for something, right? A habit or whatever we want to figure out if that's really causing the issue, and then reintroducing. So that is a good strategy, but that's, in my world, it's not the ultimate strategy. When it comes to individual cases, especially what I like to call in the presence of active disease. Now that could be diabetes, it could be cancer, it could be Crohn's, it could be anything. It could be one of those unsolved mysteries we don't know. So there is active disease going on. That's when I take it a step further. So for each individual, then we look at that individual's markers, that individual's genetics, that individual's immune system. And then I really create based on that. So it could be eliminating things that, in the presence of active disease, promote an environment for the disease to basically take over, right? Now, when we eliminate all of these things, and when we remove the root cause of the problem, and say diabetes, and somebody reverse their type 2 diabetes and are completely normal, healthy, everything is good, then I will say reintroduce those things based on their unique attributes, because it's not just random elimination, it could be oranges. I'm just using one example. Then I would say, okay, when where there is no disease, we successfully healed your body, you're not going to have oranges every day, or you're not going to have those specific things that we eliminated all the time. Imagine those things being not so beneficial. And I have a food ranking system. I go from 0 to 100. So if those foods are ranking about 20, I would say, okay, have them sporadically, have them as treats, because they're not the most beneficial things for you. And we don't want to recreate that disease nurturing environment, if you will. So a lot of practitioners do use major obvious culprits to eliminate, and it works for a lot of times, but sometimes that is not enough. So we have to kind of take it to the next level. But yeah, that's, like you said, there are major culprits that, in my book, eliminate dairy, grains, and sugar, and you're 75% ahead. Basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've reached the hour. Listen, Dr. Laleh, this was great. And I'd love to have you back again because I think there's still a lot of things that we could talk about. One of them being sugar,
Absolutely.
which is the myths of sugar. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people have. So,
Yeah.
I'd love to have you back again as a guest speaker again.
Be
And
honored.
I put your website in the chat. So if you really want to know more about Dr. Lalay's work, please reach out to her. I saw that you do have some consultations there, like a 15-minute. I think you have a couple of consultations on there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I put my gift in the chat again, so you can do that. And then
yeah.
also, if you go on the website, there is actually a place where you can book a call right there, or you can send an email, whatever you prefer. I always have a free consultation there available. So absolutely, thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. And I would
No,
love
no
to come
problem.
back. I have all these ideas, and yeah, we can go on and on about these things, right?
Yeah, I'm a nerd like you, so I love
Yep.
talking about these things.
Yay, we love nerds.
Well, thank you, everyone. Just to let you
Thank
know that
you.
this is recorded, so the recording will be available either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll put it in the chat of the meeting, and I'm going to send it out to everybody who registered. So thank you for being here, and I believe we have another one for next week. So look forward to seeing you guys again, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.